So, I want to talk a little bit about diet and supplements and my experience with them. Um, I know this can be like quite a focus for most people on the recovery journey, or maybe it's different for a lot of people, but it was a massive focus for me for a long time, but it wasn't necessarily beneficial. It was actually keeping me stuck a lot. So that's why I want to talk about it and just share my experience with it. Can be different for everyone, but I just thought I'd put this out there. So early on, when I first was struggling with some, you know, lasting symptoms from after COVID, and it kept progressing for months, and I started to get more worried about it and started to turn my attention more towards it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing what I can to fix this because it's not going away, right? And it's funny, the more I turned my attention to it, that's slowly when things got worse and worse and worse because it became a bigger and bigger focus in my life. But that's not the focus of this video. But anyways, one of the first things I tried was supplements. So, supplements was like looking for a quick fix. It was like, what can I take that is going to make this go away, right? Like, what can I take so that I don't have to face this anymore? I can just go back to this imagined life I wanted again, right? Because the truth is, life before COVID, it wasn't just COVID that caused everything. It was like a build-up of stress and avoidance and emotional repression and inauthenticity and running from issues, I suppose, building up. And then it was COVID, and then that was just one more thing on top, and then the nervous system was in this hyper alert mode, and then the labeling became long COVID, and the focus became all these symptoms, and then any symptom that appeared was further reinforcing this chronic illness, and it just spiraled out of control from there until there really were a lot of really difficult symptoms to deal with. My point I wanted to make there was this imagined oh, if I find the right supplements, I can go back to before COVID. COVID is the problem that's caused all of these things. But the truth is, if I went back to how things were before COVID, it didn't just start at COVID. There was shit I needed to deal with that had been building up, right? So it was all just an imagined non-existent place where everything's okay. There's no problems to deal with. It's just oh, if only I can take the right supplements, I'll have energy again, and then I can go about my day without this shit hanging over me that's stopping me from living my life. But it wasn't like that. That was just what the thoughts were saying. So anyways, that was the thing with supplements. So maybe for the first half of my journey, supplements were a big focus. Because also it's one of the few things that doctors are able to try and help with, it's difficult, I can imagine, being a doctor, because in these situations, I know a lot of people have had tough experiences with doctors, invalidating their experiences and saying there's nothing wrong with them and that kind of stuff. But I can also understand that it must be difficult as a doctor. You have someone with this chronic illness with all these symptoms, and you can't pick up anything, but they're really distressed, and you want to help them. So one of the few things they can recommend is try these supplements. That was my experience. The doctors I saw early on recommended supplements, and yeah, so that was a focus for me at first. I was taking so many different supplements. Honestly, at one point I was trying a lot of different things, and yeah, nothing really made a difference. I would try for quite a while, because you read online that you're not going to see immediate results. Maybe try taking something and then try this and then try that and whatnot. So yeah, I tried supplements a lot for quite a while, but looking back, it was just looking for an escape. I was looking for a quick fix, a way to not have to face the things I really needed to face. So that was the first half of my journey, and then diet was the same kind of situation. So it's tried supplements, wasn't working for months. Things were getting worse, and then it was okay. Well, diet. Let's look at diet, and I would also read on the forums that I would look for advice from others, and it was like it was like the blind leading the blind. Like everybody's like, putting on stuff that maybe helps them, and you're trying to apply that to yourself. So the only thing that I was really seeing on these forums was people recovering. There's quite a few people saying they were getting a lot better through diet. So, it just made sense that I will try the same, because that's one of the few things that I was seeing that was working. So the one diet that I was seeing recommended a lot that was helping people with long COVID symptoms was this low histamine diet. So a lot of people, there was like a theory that what was causing long COVID symptoms was like an intolerance to histamine in the body caused by like something called mast cell activation syndrome. And it was like one of the few theories that seemed the most likely. I don't know, it made the most sense. I was seeing it a lot everywhere. And a lot of people, through taking antihistamines and through low histamine diets, said they were feeling a lot better. So obviously I was going to try it, or eventually it just made sense. I was like, I've got to try this. It was like, if I really want to recover, I've got to try this, and I've got to do what's necessary. So yeah, I looked into that more, and it's a low histamine diet is like a super restrictive diet, because so many foods across many different food groups. It's not just like cutting out one food group. It's like a lot of foods that are actually quite healthy and good for you have histamines in them. So like foods like bananas, peanut butter, avo, spinach, like any cheeses, anything that's not super fresh. So yeah, if you go avocados, I don't know if I mentioned, like there's just almost more than 50%, maybe 60%, 70% of the foods I used to eat, and I didn't eat badly before this. I ate a pretty balanced diet. Like 60-70% of the foods that I ate were like not allowed on a low histamine diet. But again, I committed to this because I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to recover. So, I mean, I said that, but again, I was looking for a quick fix. So I'll do whatever it takes, but I don't want to face what's here. I want to try something that's going to get me out of this, so I don't have to face what's here, right? So it's funny how we're like inauthentic with ourselves. We're like saying like, oh, I'm willing to try whatever, and then say that until you really are just like, okay, I'll face what I need to face. So I went on the low histamine diet, and at first I didn't notice any changes. Maybe did it for like a month, and it was really difficult because I was living with my family at the time, and as I said, it was just like, it's so difficult to make meals, like almost like my breakfast, my lunches, my dinners, like I couldn't eat the stuff I used to, and it just became so restrictive. But still, I was like, I have to try this. So I did it for like a month. I really didn't notice any changes, but I was like, I'll keep trying it because I didn't really know what else to do. And eventually it becomes like a fear thing. So maybe it's 2 months, and this whole time, I was reading more on forums, and people would talk about how histamine foods would be so triggering for them. So you start to form these beliefs in your mind that like you get scared of trying those foods again. And then maybe sometimes I would try one of those foods, and I wouldn't necessarily have like a specific reaction linked to the food, but maybe later in the day I'd have some symptoms linked to something else. And often it was for me like, it was all like stress related stuff and avoidance patterns that would cause the symptoms. But at the time I was labeling it as activity induced, right? So I would do some activity, some like symptoms would come up, and then I would get like, and it was all happening unconsciously. I wasn't thinking about like consciously doing this. This was just the natural responses that were playing out, right? The symptoms would come up. There would be this fear response, blah, blah, blah. That would cause the symptoms, but then it would be like, oh shit, maybe that was from that food that I ate earlier today. So I'm going to, carry on labeling that as off limits and avoid it. So what kind of started to happen was I'd been on this low histamine diet for a couple of months. It really hadn't improved anything, but now there was this fear to going back onto the foods that had now been labeled as threats. And again, there was like these formed beliefs that, I did try this food and it might have caused a problem. So I think maybe the histamine thing is a problem. So that went on for a while, and eventually it got to the point where eating became such a stress in my life. Like I started the history because I wasn't getting any better, right? I was actually getting worse, but I was still following this super strict diet. And as I said, meal times were such a stress. And then I started looking, I just read through like the long COVID subreddits and that kind of stuff. That was where I was, like the one forum that I would look on a bit at that time. And I would see somebody saying like, oh, keto diet works, like fix their symptoms. Or there was some like other crazy, like super eliminative diets that like cut out so many foods. Can't even remember what the focus of the diet was, but they were like really, really eliminating a lot of food. And I almost wanted to combine the low histamine with these diets, and it just became so stressful. It was like, I don't know which diet to follow. There's almost no foods left to eat. Then I started focusing on like my digestive system, and I'd be like, every morning I have like digestive issues when I wake up, and I've got to absolutely nail my diet. Like, it almost became like a focus point for me. It was like, okay, what I'm going to do is make sure my digestion is perfect. Like, it was this wanting to control one aspect of it. So it was like, I'm going to nail my diet. I'm going to keep cutting out foods. Don't eat that, don't eat that, don't eat that until my digestive system is functioning like 100%. And that it was impossible. Like, I can't control that, right? So I tried that for a while, and this was probably like this was probably like close to rock bottom in like the middle of my journey, where it was just so much suffering because I was trying so hard to control these processes, and it's this resistance to what is. So like, there's what's happening, and then I was trying to control what was happening and turn it into something else, and that's when things were at their worst, right? And then eventually, around this time, this is what I've spoken about, when everything started to change, where I started to notice, like, I can't remember exactly how everything played out at the time, but it started with the beliefs, noticing my beliefs about recovery. Like, it really was because I hit rock bottom. I kept on crashing. I kept on like failing at trying to control, right? It just wasn't working. And then I started watching recovery stories. I realized, like, change my beliefs, and that's when I like stopped focusing so much on all of these things, and I realized that it was the beliefs about diet, about foods, that was keeping me stuck, not the actual foods themselves. So then over the next year, which we could call like my recovery period, where everything changed from like let's say it was throughout like 2022, so from the beginning of 22 to the end of 2022, that's when I was like at rock bottom in January, and then I started turning more inward, noticing my internal reactions, noticing how this was all a nervous system issue. It wasn't about what was out there, it was about my perception of what was out there, and how I was looking at things, and how my nervous system had become conditioned to respond to perceived threats in a certain way, and that was causing the symptoms. So yeah, all of that, and then the focus on diet wasn't so big anymore, and I started reintroducing foods. And it's the same as reintroducing exercise and activity and all of those things. There can be flare-ups at first because of the conditioned response of the nervous system, right? So I could start eating foods again, and maybe like my gut would have a little bit of a response, and I'd have some digestive issues. And in the past, it would have been like, okay, shit, avoid that food, like clear evidence that this is bad for me. Whereas now it would be like, okay, notice that, like, firstly, this is new to my body again, like I haven't had this food for so long, and I've conditioned my nervous system to see this food as a threat. So there's still going to be that conditioning, and it's just the more you're aware of the responses, and the more you don't resist it. So you can be like, I see the body, you just notice what's happening, and it's like, okay, it's fine, like that reaction can be there, like let those symptoms be there, welcome them, like, oh shit, I feel that uncomfortable sensation in my stomach, or you have digestive issues, just like let that experience be there. It's difficult, and then let your resistance to the experience be there as well. So it's like noticing the thoughts saying like, I don't want this to be happening right now. I would rather be feeling comfortable and not having to face these issues. Like, okay, that can be there as well. And it was the more I was able to work through this kind of stuff that I could reintroduce foods again. And the more, okay, so then the next time you have that food, there's less of a reaction because your body's more accustomed to it now. The conditioning is falling away. That conditioning of this is bad for me. You're like, oh, I've had this before. Maybe there was a slight reaction, but I know that the food is not the problem, right? And then again, the more you can see the symptoms or the flare-ups as an opportunity. It's like, okay, there's symptoms, there's a flare-up, great, this is where the magic happens. It's like learn to welcome that difficult sensation. And it's not easy, so that's what I was just saying, like welcome the resistance to it as well, the fighting against it, like that's all welcome. So yeah, that's how I addressed like this supposed food intolerances that I built up. But again, it was all like because of the beliefs I'd formed about the foods. And then over time, like the more I worked through this kind of stuff, the more I was meditating, becoming more aware of my reactions to things. I started introducing more and more foods. And then, yeah, I like as a part of all of this crazy diet I was following, I wasn't drinking any alcohol, caffeine, no sugar, like super, like I hadn't had any of that stuff for like over a year. And then eventually, as I started recovering more and more, so like towards the end of my recovery journey, once I was eating like a pretty balanced diet again, then, like, oh, let me eat something like super unhealthy and sugary and whatnot. Because then there was still those, it was like addressing each label towards the end. So it was like, that was still seen as like a threat maybe, or it was just like something I hadn't worked through yet. So then it was like eating a bunch of unhealthy shit for, like just like not trying to control everything and not resisting certain things. So it was like, oh, maybe I eat unhealthily for a day, and then after that I don't feel like amazing, so I'd rather eat healthy again. But it's not like this rigid, like if I don't eat healthy, like shit, I'm gonna crash and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of just working through all of those things. And yeah, as I recovered more and more, I eventually tried caffeine again, I tried alcohol again, and yeah, it was like working through like, oh shit, there's still a belief there that like I can't do this. And you wake up after like a beer or two, and then you got a bit of a hangover. And now, like, because I'd learned to approach things, dealing with the symptoms, it could be like, oh, a hangover, like let's feel, why is a hangover like uncomfortable? And now a hangover is like not such an issue. But it's funny, the more like open you are to just letting things go however they go, like I find myself now eating pretty healthily. Like it's just how I want to eat. I don't drink much, but it's not a problem if the situation arises where, friends are, there's the situation, a social occasion where, I'm drinking, it's not an issue, but it's not something that I feel the urge to do often. And then the same with whatever, So it's just like, it was all those fixations on those things, that this is bad for me, this is going to cause the symptoms. That was what was causing the problems, right? So yeah, that's my experience with diet and supplements. And yeah, so it didn't, like, I know for other people, diet and supplements maybe help them. And if for you that's the case, then I'd encourage you to, stick with it. Maybe some people do need to address their diets. Because as I said, I was having a pretty balanced diet beforehand. And now, because of all my focus on healthy foods, like I do enjoy just eating healthily. So it's not like I just eat rubbish all the time now. But there's not that fixation on I have to eat like this. So, maybe for some people you do have to focus on diet, but be honest with yourself. Like, is it the diet that's actually causing the problem? Are you looking for like an escape through diet or supplements and not facing what's right here? Like, yeah, like what you need to work through. And are you, like, is your fixation on diet or supplements causing you more stress and trouble than it's worth? And then maybe try working with something that is healthy, like eating, for me, like eating tomatoes and avocados and bananas again. Like, those were foods I knew were healthy, but it was this histamine labeling and belief that was like, this is bad for me. And then trying those again, then I could go back to a more normal diet. So I just wanted to make a video about diet and supplements, and yeah, maybe my experience resonates and it can help somebody if it's like causing issues for you as well.